The snow had been falling for 3 days straight when Willow Lancaster felt her stepfather's meaty hand close around her arm and drag her toward the cabin door, her stockinged feet sliding uselessly across the rough wooden floor as she clawed at anything to stop what was coming. "Please, Henry, I will do better, I promise," she begged, her voice cracking with terror as the February wind howled through the cracks in the walls. Her mother had been dead only 6 months, buried in the frozen ground behind the church in Jordan Valley, Oregon. And Henry Briggs had wasted no time showing his true nature once the woman who had stood between him and his cruelty was gone. "You ate the last of the bread without asking," he snarled, his breath reeking of whiskey as he yanked open the door. The blast of frigid air hit Willow like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. "Maybe a night in the cold will teach you some respect." "Henry, no, I will freeze." She tried to grip the doorframe, but he was stronger, his rage fueled by the bottle he had been nursing all afternoon. With one brutal shove, he threw her out into the snow. She landed hard on her hands and knees, the ice burning her skin even through her thin dress. Before she could scramble back toward the door, he slammed it shut, and she heard the heavy bar drop into place on the other side. "Henry, please." She pounded on the door until her fists were numb, screaming until her throat was raw, but no answer came except the wind's mocking howl. The cabin sat 3 miles outside of Jordan Valley, isolated on a patch of scrubland that barely supported their few chickens and the old milk cow. No neighbors would hear her cries. No one would come. The reality of her situation settled over her like the snow that was already gathering on her shoulders. She was 18 years old, alone, and she would die here if she did not move. Willow forced herself to stand, her feet already aching from the cold that seeped through her wool stockings. She could not stay at the door. She had to find shelter, had to find help. The nearest building was the Thornton Ranch, maybe 2 miles east if she could keep her bearings in the storm. Old Mr. Thornton had been kind to her mother. Perhaps he would take pity on her. Willow wrapped her arms around herself and started walking, each step sending shards of pain through her feet as the snow piled deeper. Within minutes, she could no longer feel her toes. Within 10 minutes, her stockings were soaked through and starting to freeze to her skin. She stumbled forward through drifts that reached her knees, her dress growing heavy with ice and snow. The world had become nothing but white and gray. The landmarks she knew disappeared beneath the storm. Was she still heading east? She could not tell anymore. The wind pushed her sideways, and she had no strength left to resist it. Her feet were beyond pain now, gone completely numb, and when she looked down she saw that her stockings had torn away, leaving her feet bare and blue against the white snow. Willow fell for the first time when her feet simply refused to hold her weight anymore. She got up. She fell again 20 yards later. This time it took longer to rise. The cold was creeping up her legs into her core, and she found herself thinking that maybe it would not be so bad to just rest for a moment. Just a moment. She sank down into a drift beside what might have been a fence post, and the snow felt almost soft, almost warm. Her eyes drifted closed. She did not hear the horse approaching, did not know that anyone had found her until strong arms lifted her from the snow and a man's voice, rough with alarm, cut through the fog in her mind. "Good God, girl, what happened to you?" Willow tried to answer, but her jaw would not work properly. Everything felt distant and strange. She was moving, being carried, and then there was warmth, blessed warmth, and the sensation of it was so painful she cried out. I know it hurts. Stay with me now. Stay awake." The voice was insistent, dragging her back from the soft darkness that had been pulling at her. She forced her eyes open and saw a man's face above her, angular and weathered, with eyes the color of smoke. He had carried her inside somewhere, a small cabin by the look of it, and was laying her down near a pot-bellied stove that radiated heat. "My feet," she managed to whisper, trying to look down, but he stopped her. "Do not look yet. Let me tend to them first." He was already pulling blankets around her, tucking them carefully around her shivering body while leaving her feet exposed to the air. "They are frostbitten bad. I need to warm them slowly or you will lose them. What is your name?" "Willow Lancaster." Her teeth were chattering so hard she could barely speak. "My stepfather, he threw me out." The man's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the dark stubble on his cheek. "Henry Briggs," she nodded, surprised he knew. "I know of him. I am Victor Whitmore. I work the Thornton Ranch, have a line cabin here for the winter months when I am watching the cattle." He moved away from her, and she heard water being poured, the clink of metal. When he returned, he knelt beside her feet with a basin of water that steamed gently in the lamplight. "This is going to hurt worse than anything you have felt yet, but it has to be done. The water is just barely warm. I am going to ease your feet into it slowly." Willow nodded, bracing herself, but nothing could have prepared her for the agony that shot through her when her frozen flesh touched the water. She screamed, biting down on her lip hard enough to draw blood, and Victor caught her hands when she instinctively tried to pull away. "I am sorry, I am so sorry, but you have to leave them in. Just breathe through it. It will get better." His voice was steady, anchoring her, and she fixed her eyes on his face, using it as something to focus on besides the pain. He had dark hair that needed cutting, falling across his forehead in unruly waves, and lines around his eyes that spoke of long days in the sun. He was maybe 25, perhaps a bit older, and there was something solid about him, something that made her feel safer than she had felt in months. The pain began to shift after several minutes, from a sharp burning to a deep, throbbing ache. Color was returning to her feet, though they were still mottled and swollen. Victor watched them carefully, checking them with gentle fingers that knew what they were doing. "You are lucky," he said finally, "or as lucky as you can be in this situation. I do not think you will lose any toes, but it was close. Another hour and I would be having a different conversation with you." He lifted her feet from the water and dried them carefully with a clean cloth, then wrapped them in soft flannel. "You need to stay off them for several days at least. They will hurt for a good while yet." "I have nowhere to go," Willow said, the reality of her situation crashing down on her now that the immediate crisis was passing. "He will not let me back in. Even if he would, I cannot go back there." "You are not going back there," Victor said firmly. "You will stay here until you are healed, and then we will figure something out. Jordan Valley is not a big town, but there are good people there. Mrs. Chen at the boarding house is always looking for help. The school teacher might need an assistant. We will find you something." He stood and moved to the stove, ladling soup from a pot into a tin cup. "Can you sit up? You need to get something warm inside you." She managed to prop herself up on her elbows, and he helped her the rest of the way, supporting her back with his arm while he held the cup to her lips. The soup was simple, just beans and salt pork, but it was the best thing she had ever tasted. She drank it slowly, feeling the warmth spread through her chest and belly. "Thank you," she whispered when the cup was empty. "You saved my life. I was out checking the fence lines when I saw something dark in the snow. I thought it was a calf at first." His face was grim. "No one should have been out in this storm. What your stepfather did, that is attempted murder. He was drunk. He gets mean when he drinks. That is no excuse." Victor took the cup from her and set it aside. "You should rest now. I will keep the fire going through the night and check on your feet regularly. If they start to blister or turn black, I will have to take you into town to Doc Morrison, storm or not. I do not want to be a burden." Even as she said it, her eyes were closing, exhaustion pulling her down. "You are not a burden. Now sleep." She did, falling into darkness so complete it felt like drowning. When she woke, gray dawn light was seeping through the cabin's single window, and Victor was asleep in a chair beside the stove. His arms crossed over his chest and his chin dropped forward. He had stayed up watching over her. The realization brought tears to her eyes. After 6 months of cruelty and fear, kindness felt like a shock to her system. She must have made some sound because his eyes opened immediately, alert despite having slept sitting up. "How do you feel?" "Sore. Everywhere." Her feet were throbbing steadily, and her muscles ached from shivering, but she was alive and warm. "The storm, still going. We are snowed in for at least another day, maybe 2. He stood and stretched, his joints popping audibly. "I need to check the livestock and dig out the door." "Will you be all right alone for a bit?" "Yes." She watched him pull on a heavy coat and wrap a scarf around his face before opening the door. Snow had drifted halfway up the frame, and he had to shove hard to push through it. Cold air rushed in, and she was grateful for the blankets cocooning her. He was gone perhaps half an hour, and when he returned his mustache and eyebrows were white with frost. "Horses are fine. I brought in more wood." He stamped the snow from his boots and shrugged out of his coat, hanging it on a peg by the door. "I am going to make breakfast. Are you hungry?" "Yes." She was suddenly ravenous, her body demanding fuel to recover from its ordeal. She watched him work at the stove, his movements economical and practiced. He fried bacon and eggs, made coffee thick and strong, and brought her a plate piled high with food. "Can you manage?" he asked, and she nodded, taking the plate with shaking hands. Her fingers were clumsy, still recovering from the cold, but she managed to feed herself. Victor sat across from her with his own plate, and they ate in silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "Tell me about your stepfather. How long has he been treating you poorly?" Willow set down her fork, her appetite fading. "My mother married him 2 years ago. We needed someone to help with the homestead after my father died. Henry seemed kind at first, but after the wedding he changed. He drank heavily and had a temper, but he never hurt me while Mother was alive. She kept him in check somehow. But after she died last August, he got worse. He would yell at me for any little thing, call me lazy and worthless. Sometimes he would not let me eat if he decided I had not worked hard enough. Yesterday was the first time he put his hands on me, though. Did anyone in town know what was happening? I think some suspected. Mrs. Chen would give me extra when I came to buy supplies, and she always asked if I was all right, but I was ashamed. I kept thinking I could handle it, that if I just tried harder he would be satisfied. She laughed bitterly. Stupid. Not stupid, hopeful. There is a difference. Victor leaned forward, his gray eyes serious. You cannot go back there, Willow, you know that, right? Even after the storm passes. Even if he apologizes and begs you to come home, men like that do not change. I know, but my mother is buried there. I hate to leave her. The dead do not need us near them to remember them. Your mother would want you safe. He collected their plates and took them to the wash basin. We will figure this out, I promise. The storm kept them trapped together for 3 more days. Victor slept in the chair or on the floor while Willow took the narrow bed, and he tended to her feet with a care that made her throat tight. He changed the bandages, checked for signs of infection, and gradually helped her stand and take a few hobbling steps. The pain was intense at first, but it eased as circulation returned. He was right about the blistering. Her feet developed huge fluid-filled bubbles across the toes and heels, but he drained them carefully and kept everything clean. They talked to pass the time. Victor told her about growing up in Wyoming, the son of a rancher who had lost everything in the hard winter of 1886. He had been 17 when he left home to find work, drifting from ranch to ranch until he landed at the Thornton place 3 years ago. Old Mr. Thornton is good to work for. Fair wages, decent food does not work you to death. I have been saving to buy my own spread eventually. Nothing big, just enough for a small herd and maybe some horses. He gazed out the window at the endless white. This country is harsh, but it is honest. It does not pretend to be something it is not. Willow found herself drawn to his steady presence, the way he seemed comfortable with silence, but never made her feel unwelcome when she wanted to talk. She told him about her childhood, back when her father was alive and they had a small farm in Missouri. Those had been happy years before disease took him and left them struggling. Her mother had tried so hard to keep the farm going, but without a man's labor, they could not manage it. When Henry Briggs came along with his promises and his homestead in Oregon, it had seemed like salvation. She wanted to believe in him, Willow said. She needed to believe in him, so she ignored the signs. Do you blame her? No, I understand why she did what she did. I just wish it had turned out differently. On the fourth day, the storm finally broke, and brilliant sunshine glinted off snow that had transformed the landscape into something unrecognizable. Drifts towered higher than a man's head in places, and the world was silent except for the drip of icicles beginning to melt. I need to ride to the main ranch and let them know I am all right, Victor said. They will be worried, and I need to speak to Mr. Thornton about your situation. He has connections in town, and he does not tolerate men who abuse women. He will help. Will I come with you? Willow asked, though her feet were still too tender to walk far, much less ride. Not yet. The drifts are too deep, and I need to break trail. I will come back for you tomorrow with a wagon if the roads are passable. Will you be all right here alone? She nodded, though the thought of being without him made her anxious. In just a few days, she had come to rely on his presence, his quiet strength. But she could not cling to him like a child. She had to start standing on her own again. He left just after dawn, and the cabin felt enormous and empty without him. Willow kept herself busy, tidying what little there was to tidy and preparing a meal so that there would be food ready when he returned. Her feet hurt, but she could put weight on them now, and she practiced walking back and forth across the cabin floor, gritting her teeth through the pain. He returned as the sun was setting, bringing with him fresh supplies and news. Mr. Thornton wants to meet you. He is sending the sheriff to have a talk with Henry Briggs about what he did, and Mrs. Chen has a room ready for you at the boarding house. She says she can use help with the laundry and cooking, and she will give you room and board plus a small wage until you can get on your feet properly. Willow felt tears sting her eyes. Why is everyone being so kind to me? Because you deserve kindness, Victor said simply. And because people around here take care of their own. You are part of this community now, whether Henry Briggs likes it or not. They left for town the next morning, Willow bundled in blankets on the wagon seat beside Victor. The journey took hours, the horses struggling through deep snow, but finally, the scattered buildings of Jordan Valley came into view. It was not much of a town, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a boarding house, and a handful of other businesses, but it looked like paradise to Willow. Mrs. Chen came out to meet them, a tiny woman with iron-gray hair and a grip like steel when she took Willow's hand. You come inside, poor child, I have hot bath ready and good meal. Victor, you bring her things. She does not have any things, Victor said grimly. Everything she owns is at her stepfather's place. We fix that. I have extra dresses and the ladies at church will help, Mrs. Chen clucked her tongue disapprovingly as she helped Willow down from the wagon. You stay with me now. You are safe. Over the following weeks, Willow began to build a new life. The work at the boarding house was hard, but it was honest work, and Mrs. Chen was patient as Willow's feet healed. The other women in town welcomed her with gifts of clothing and shoes, and though some whispered about the scandal of what Henry had done, most treated her with sympathy. The sheriff had indeed visited her stepfather, and according to town gossip, had made it very clear that if Henry so much as looked at Willow wrong, he would find himself in a jail cell. Henry had not shown his face in town since, and Willow was grateful for it. She did not want to see him, did not want to be reminded of those dark months. Victor came to town every week, ostensibly to pick up supplies for the ranch, but he always found time to stop by the boarding house. Sometimes he would take Willow for walks down the main street, shortening his stride to match her slower pace as her feet continued to heal. Sometimes they would simply sit in Mrs. Chen's parlor and talk, their conversations ranging from the mundane to the profound. Willow found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that surprised her. She would catch herself watching the road for his familiar figure, and her heart would lift when she spotted him riding into town on his sturdy bay gelding. He made her laugh with his dry observations about ranch life, and he listened when she needed to talk through her complicated feelings about everything that had happened. "I am afraid sometimes that I am broken," she confessed one afternoon in early April. They were sitting on the boarding house porch, watching the snow melt into rushing streams in the gutters. "That what he did to me changed something fundamental, and I will never be normal again." "You are not broken," Victor said firmly. "You are healing. There is a difference. And healing takes time. How much time? As much as you need." He reached over and took her hand, his rough palm warm against hers. "I am not going anywhere, Willow." The simple statement made her breath catch. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth written plainly in his face. He cared for her, perhaps more than cared. The realization sent a thrill through her that was equal parts exhilaration and terror. "Victor, I do not know if I am ready for anything beyond friendship," she said carefully. "I am still figuring out how to be myself again. I know, and that is all right." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "I am just letting you know where I stand. When and if you are ever ready for more, I will be here. And if that day never comes, I will still be here as your friend. You get to choose, Willow. That is important. You get to choose." The words settled something inside her, easing a tension she had not fully recognized she was carrying. She did get to choose. Her life was her own again. Spring arrived in earnest, transforming the brown landscape into something green and vibrant. Willow's feet healed completely, leaving only faint scars as a reminder of that terrible night. She grew stronger, more confident, and began to remember who she had been before Henry Briggs had tried to break her. And through it all, Victor was there. Not hovering or demanding, but present, steady. True to his word, he never pushed for more than she was willing to give, but she saw the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching, and she began to recognize the feeling that bloomed in her own chest when he smiled at her. She was falling in love with him. The realization came to her one morning in late May, as she was hanging laundry behind the boarding house. Victor had stopped by with a bouquet of wildflowers, the kind that grew in the meadows beyond town, and the gesture was so sweet and unexpected that she had found herself smiling for the rest of the day. When had his visits become the highlights of her week? When had the thought of him become a constant presence in her mind, as natural as breathing? Mrs. Chen noticed, of course. The woman noticed everything. "That Victor, he is good man," she said one evening as they were preparing dinner. "Strong, kind. He looks at you like you are sunrise." "I know," Willow said softly. "You look at him same way." "I know that too. So, what you waiting for? Willow paused in her chopping, considering the question. What was she waiting for? Fear, she realized. She was still afraid of trusting her judgment, of opening herself up to the possibility of being hurt again. But Victor was not Henry. He had proven that over and over in the months she had known him. He had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. He had given her space and time and friendship without demanding anything more. He was everything Henry was not. "I do not know," she admitted. "Maybe I am just being foolish. Not foolish, careful. But sometimes being too careful means missing out on good things. Mrs. Chen pointed her knife at Willow for emphasis. "You think about it." She did think about it. For days, she turned the question over in her mind, examining her feelings from every angle. And finally, she admitted to herself what she had known for weeks now. She loved Victor Whitmore, and she wanted to see where that love could lead. He came to town the following Saturday, and she asked if he would take a walk with her after she finished her chores. They strolled down to the creek that ran behind the church, where new grass grew thick and cottonwood trees were leafing out in shades of pale green. "Victor, I have been thinking about what you said, about where you stand." She stopped walking and turned to face him, her heart hammering in her chest. "I am ready now, for more than friendship, if the offer still stands." His face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am certain. You have been patient with me, kinder than I had any right to expect, and somewhere along the way I fell in love with you." The words came easier than she had expected, and saying them out loud made them feel more real. "I love you, Victor." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and she felt the rapid beat of his heart against her cheek. "I have loved you since the day I found you in the snow. You were so brave, so determined to survive, and I knew then that you were someone special. I love you, Willow Lancaster, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me with your heart." He kissed her then, soft and gentle, a question and a promise all at once. She kissed him back, tasting hope and happiness and a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. They courted properly after that, much to Mrs. Chen's approval. Victor would come to town every weekend, and they would attend church together, go on picnics by the creek, and sit on the boarding house porch in the evenings talking about their dreams. He told her about the land he had been saving for, 160 acres up near the Idaho border with good water and grazing. "I have almost enough to make the down payment," he said. "By next spring, I should be able to start building. A small house at first, but solid. Big enough for a family eventually." He glanced at her and she saw hope and nervousness in his eyes. "If that is something you might want. With you, yes, that is something I would want very much." She laced her fingers through his. "But I need to be honest with you. I do not know if I can have children. My mother had so much trouble and I always feared I might be the same. Then we will face that together if it comes to it. There are other ways to make a family if we want one. Orphans need homes too." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "I want you, Willow. Children would be a blessing, but you are the one I am choosing." In August, exactly 1 year after her mother had died, Victor asked her to marry him. They were standing in the meadow where he picked the wildflowers he brought her, and the sunset was painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. He got down on one knee in the tall grass, producing a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. "I do not have much to offer you yet," he said, "but I have a strong back and a willing heart, and I promise I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret saying yes. Will you marry me, Willow?" "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in September at the little church in Jordan Valley, with Mrs. Chen and Mr. Thornton standing as witnesses, and half the town crowding into the pews. Willow wore a dress that the church ladies had made for her, white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, and she carried a bouquet of those same wildflowers that Victor loved to bring her. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Victor kissed her in front of everyone, and the congregation cheered. It was the happiest day of Willow's life. They moved into a small cabin on the Thornton Ranch while Victor continued to work and save for his own land. It was cozy, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs, and Willow made it into a home. She planted a garden, made curtains for the windows, and cooked meals that she and Victor would eat together at the little table he had built. Life was not always easy. The work was hard and the winters were long, but they faced everything together. When Willow woke from nightmares about being thrown into the snow, Victor would hold her until the shaking stopped, whispering that she was safe, that he had her. And when the ranch work left him exhausted and aching, she would rub liniment into his sore muscles and remind him that their own land was getting closer every day. In the spring of 1888, Victor made the down payment on his 160 acres. They rode out to see it on a bright April morning, and Willow cried when she saw the creek running through the property and the meadows that would support cattle and horses. That summer they built their house, a real house with 3 bedrooms and a proper kitchen and a porch that looked out over the land they now owned. It was during the house raising, with neighbors from all over the valley coming to help, that Willow realized she had missed her monthly cycle. She did not say anything at first, afraid to hope, but when she missed the second one, she went to see Doc Morrison. He confirmed what she had barely dared to believe. She was pregnant. She told Victor that night as they were lying in bed in their new house, looking up at the beams they had watched men raise into place. "I am going to have a baby. In December, the doctor thinks." Victor went very still beside her. Then he sat up and pulled her into his arms, and she felt wetness on his cheeks. He was crying. "Are you certain? Are you all right?" "I am certain, and I am healthy. Doc Morrison says everything looks good." She wiped at his tears with her thumbs, her own eyes filling in response. "We are going to be parents, Victor. I cannot believe it. I never thought I would be this happy." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Thank you. Thank you for choosing to trust me, for building this life with me. Thank you for finding me in the snow," she whispered back. "For saving me in every way a person can be saved." Their son was born on a cold December night, 3 years almost to the day after Victor had found Willow freezing in a snowdrift. The labor was long and difficult, but when Doc Morrison finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Willow understood for the first time what her mother must have felt when she held her own children. This tiny person was a miracle, a blend of her and Victor, and she loved him with a fierceness that shocked her. "What should we name him?" Victor asked, stroking the baby's dark hair with one gentle finger. "I was thinking Thomas, after my father, Thomas Whitmore." "Thomas," Victor repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, son." They settled into the rhythms of parenthood, learning as they went. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong, and he grew quickly. By the time he was walking, Willow was pregnant again, and this time a daughter was born, a little girl with her mother's blonde hair and her father's gray eyes. They named her Rose, after the wild roses that bloomed on their property every June. The years rolled by, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. The ranch prospered, growing from a small operation to a respectable spread with a decent-sized herd and a reputation for quality stock. Victor hired hands when they needed them, and Willow managed the household and helped with the bookkeeping, her careful records ensuring they always knew exactly where they stood financially. Sometimes Willow would ride out to the place where Victor had found her all those years ago. It was on their property now, that stretch of fence line where she had collapsed into the snow. The fence post she had fallen beside was still there, weathered but standing, and she would sit on her horse and remember that terrified girl who had thought she was going to die. She was glad that girl had survived, glad she had found the strength to keep going just a little bit longer, because that desperation had led her here, to this life, to this man, to these children. It had led her home. In 1895, 7 years after they had moved onto their own land, Willow received word that her stepfather had died. Pneumonia had taken him during a particularly harsh February, and he had been buried in the churchyard without ceremony. She felt nothing when she heard the news, not satisfaction or sadness, just a kind of distant indifference. He had taken up enough of her thoughts over the years. She would not waste more on him now, but she did ride out to her mother's grave, which she visited twice a year without fail. She brought fresh flowers and pulled the weeds that had grown around the simple headstone. "I have a good life, Mama," she said quietly. "A husband who loves me, children who are healthy and happy, a home that is truly mine. I wish you could have known them. I wish you could have had this kind of happiness too." She paused, swallowing past the lump in her throat. "I forgive you for marrying Henry. I understand why you did it, and I hope wherever you are, you have found peace." Victor had ridden with her, staying back to give her privacy, but when she returned to where he waited with the horses, he pulled her into his arms without a word. He always knew when she needed holding. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am, I truly am." And it was true. The scars from that terrible winter had faded, both the physical ones on her feet and the emotional ones on her heart. She was not the broken, frightened girl Victor had pulled from the snow. She was strong now, confident in herself and in her place in the world. Thomas turned out to have a gift with horses, and by the time he was 15, he was training the ranch horses and earning a reputation that brought buyers from as far away as boys. Rose had her mother's head for figures and her father's way with animals, and Willow had no doubt she would help run the ranch someday, if that was what she chose. In 1901, Victor and Willow celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary. They had a party, inviting neighbors and friends, including Mrs. Chen, who was now quite elderly but still sharp as a tack. She cornered Willow in the kitchen while Willow was slicing cake. "You remember when I told you not to be too careful," the old woman said. "That sometimes being too careful means missing good things. I remember." "I was right, yes," Willow laughed and kissed her wrinkled cheek. "You were absolutely right, as usual." That night, after the guests had gone and the children were in bed, Victor and Willow sat on their porch swing, watching the stars come out over the valley. It was the same view they had enjoyed for over a decade now, but it never got old. "You ever think about that night?" Victor asked. "The night I found you, sometimes, less often than I used to." Willow leaned her head on his shoulder. "It seems like a lifetime ago, like it happened to someone else. It shaped you, though, made you who you are, maybe. Or maybe I was always going to be this person, and I just needed the chance to become her." She tilted her face up to look at him. "What I know for certain is that I would not be who I am without you. You gave me more than shelter that night. You gave me back my life." "You did the same for me," Victor said quietly. "I was drifting before I met you, just going through the motions. You gave me a purpose, a reason to build something lasting. You made me want to be better." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, rocking gently, the chains of the swing creaking rhythmically. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and one of their dogs answered with a low woof before settling back down. "I love you," Willow said, "more than I could ever put into words." "I love you too," Always have, always will. Victor kissed the top of her head. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago, for taking a chance on a cowboy who did not have much more than a dream and a promise. Best decision I ever made. As the years continued to unfold, Victor and Willow watched their children grow into adults. Thomas married a girl from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the far corner of the property, starting their own family. Rose, ever independent, went to Portland for a few years to work in a bank, but she eventually returned to the valley, admitting that she missed the wide open spaces and the rhythm of ranch life too much to stay away. Victor's hair turned gray at the temples, then all over, and Willow found silver strands threading through her blonde hair. They moved a little slower, worked a little less, and spent more time sitting on that porch swing, watching grandchildren run through the yard where their own children had played. In the winter of 1910, a snowstorm blew through the valley, the first really serious one in several years. Victor and Willow sat inside by the fire, listening to the wind howl around the corners of their house, and Willow reached over to take his hand. "It is snowing like it did that night," she said. "The night you found me." 26 years ago, Victor said. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like 100 years ago. Are you glad you went to check the fence lines that day?" He turned to look at her, his gray eyes still as sharp and kind as they had been when he was 26. "Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me, so yes, I am glad. I am grateful every single day. So am I." Willow squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses from decades of hard work, the strength that age had not diminished. "So am I." The storm passed, as all storms do, leaving behind a world transformed by white. Victor and Willow bundled up and walked out into it, their boots crunching through the pristine snow. They walked to the old fence post where he had found her, and they stood there together. Two people who had built a life from nothing but determination and love. "If I could go back and tell that frozen girl what her future would hold, I wonder if she would believe me," Willow mused. "I think she would, because I think even then you knew you were a survivor. You knew you were meant for more than what Henry Briggs tried to reduce you to." "Maybe, or maybe I was just too stubborn to die," Victor laughed, the sound rich and warm. "That too." They walked back to the house arm in arm, leaving parallel tracks in the snow. Inside, Willow made hot coffee and they sat at the kitchen table, the same table Victor had built when they first moved into this house 22 years ago. It was scarred and worn now, marked by years of family meals and children's homework and long conversations, but it was solid. It would last, like their marriage, like their love. In the spring of 1912, Willow planted a garden as she did every year, working the soil with her hands and planning where the tomatoes would go and where the beans would climb. Her feet, which had once been so badly frostbitten, she nearly lost them, were strong and healthy, carrying her through her days without complaint. She thought sometimes about the randomness of it all. If Victor had checked the fence lines an hour earlier or an hour later, she would have died. If the storm had been worse, he might not have been able to save her even if he did find her. So many tiny moments that could have gone differently, any one of which would have changed everything. But they had not gone differently. He had found her. He had saved her. And they had built this beautiful, messy, wonderful life together. Victor came up behind her as she was staking the tomato plants and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about? How lucky I am. How lucky we are. Not luck. Grace. We were given a chance and we made the most of it." She turned in his arms to face him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "I would do it all again, you know. Every hard moment, every struggle. I would do it all again to end up right here with you." "Me too," he said, and kissed her. And the afternoon sun shone down on them both, warm and golden, full of promise for all the years still to come. Thomas and his wife gave them 4 grandchildren, and Rose eventually married a banker from town and added 3 more. The big house that had once echoed with the sounds of just 2 children now rang with the chaos of family gatherings, and Victor and Willow sat at the head of the table at holidays, watching their legacy unfold around them. They had started with nothing. Victor had been a ranch hand with dreams of his own land, and Willow had been a girl thrown out into the snow to die. But they had built something that would last, something that would carry on long after they were gone. A family, a home, a love that had endured everything life threw at it. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1918, the whole family gathered for a celebration. There were tables set up in the yard, food piled high, children running everywhere, and music from a fiddle that Thomas had learned to play. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, someone called for Victor and Willow to dance. They stood together in the center of the yard, and Victor took Willow's hand and placed his other hand on her waist, just as he had done at their wedding 30 years ago. They moved slowly, swaying more than truly dancing, but it did not matter. What mattered was that they were still here, still together, still in love. "You remember what I said on our wedding day?" Victor asked softly. "You said a lot of things. I said I would spend every day making sure you never regretted saying yes. Do you regret it?" Willow smiled up at him, this man who had saved her in every way that mattered. Not for a single second. They danced until the song ended and their grandchildren clamored for attention, pulling them in different directions. But throughout the evening, Willow would catch Victor's eye across the yard, and they would share a smile that said everything words could not. Years turned into decades. Victor's step grew slower, and Willow's hands became twisted with arthritis, but they were still there for each other. When Victor's back gave him trouble, Willow would help him with his boots. When Willow could not open a jar, Victor would open it for her with a flourish and a joke about her needing to eat more to keep her strength up. In the summer of 1925, Victor became ill. Doc Morrison, now an old man himself, came out to the ranch and examined him, then pulled Willow aside with a grave face. "His heart is failing. I am sorry, Willow. There is nothing I can do except make him comfortable." Willow nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She had known this day would come eventually. They were both in their 60s now, and no one lived forever, but knowing it was coming did not make it easier. She tended to him through that summer, and he was patient and grateful, never complaining about the indignity of needing help with things he had always done for himself. Their children and grandchildren came to visit, filling the house with life and noise, and Victor smiled at them all, soaking in the love that surrounded him. One evening in early September, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in those colors they both loved, Victor asked Willow to help him out to the porch swing. She did, settling him carefully and then sitting beside him, his arm around her shoulders. "This is where I want to be," he said. "Right here with you, looking out at the land we built together." "It is a good spot," Willow agreed, her voice thick with tears she was trying not to shed. "I am not afraid," Victor said. "I have had a good life, a better life than I ever dreamed possible because of you." "Because of us," Willow corrected. "We did this together." "Together," he agreed. They sat in silence for a while, rocking gently. "Will you promise me something, anything? Do not mourn me too long. Live your life, be with the family, and know that I will always be with you. Every sunset you watch, every horse Thomas trains, every time Rose makes you laugh, I will be there." "I promise," she whispered. He died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep with Willow holding his hand. She buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, in a spot where he used to sit and watch the cattle graze. The entire valley turned out for the funeral, testament to the life he had lived and the man he had been. Willow kept her promise. She mourned him, because you cannot love someone for 37 years and not mourn their loss, but she did not let grief consume her. She stayed involved with the ranch, though Thomas ran it now. She taught her grandchildren to bake bread and tend gardens and mend fences. She sat on the porch swing and watched the sunsets, and she talked to Victor as if he were still sitting beside her, because in a way he was. He was in the wood of the house he had built, in the land he had worked, in the children and grandchildren who carried his values forward. He was in her heart, as much a part of her as her own heartbeat. Willow lived another 8 years after Victor's death. She saw great-grandchildren born, saw the ranch continue to prosper, and saw the valley change as automobiles and electricity arrived. But some things did not change. Love endured. Family endured. The land endured. On a winter evening in 1933, Willow sat on her porch swing, wrapped in blankets against the cold. Snow was falling gently, and she watched it settle on the ground, thinking about that night 49 years ago when she had stumbled through a storm and a cowboy had saved her life. She had been so afraid then, so certain that her life was ending, but it had not been an ending at all. It had been a beginning, the beginning of everything that mattered. "I am ready now," she said softly to the empty air, and maybe to Victor wherever he was. "I have had my life, and it was beautiful. Thank you for giving it to me." She closed her eyes, and the snow fell softly around her, peaceful and pure. In the morning, Rose found her there, still sitting on the swing, a slight smile on her face as if she had seen something wonderful in her final moments. They buried her next to Victor on the hill, and the family gathered once more, 3 generations standing together in the cold. Thomas spoke about his mother's strength and resilience, about how she had overcome hardship to build a life of love and meaning. Rose talked about her kindness and her laugh, and how she had taught them all what it meant to survive and to thrive. And the grandchildren, some of whom were grown now with children of their own, shared stories of a grandmother who had shown them what true love looked like. A love that had started in a snowstorm and had lasted a lifetime. A love that had built a family and a legacy that would endure for generations. The snow fell on Jordan Valley, Oregon, covering the ranch and the town and the valley beyond. It fell on the graves of Willow and Victor, side by side on the hill, together even in death as they had been in life. And somewhere in that snow, in the peace and quiet of a winter evening, 2 souls walked together through fields of wildflowers, laughing and young again, their frozen feet warm forever.